Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your usual host, David Fox. With me is my usual co-host, UberHansen. We are here live with light, not unlike some people who may be without light because the sun got blocked by the moon, if you're into that sort of thing. We're here to provide you with our usual level of analysis, just slightly overshadowed by a, sort of once every 20, 30 years galactic event, solar event, however you want to phrase it. So
Overshadowed.
If you're more interested in that, I get it, but we appreciate anyone that tunes in. Before we go any further, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Like you said, we're overshadowed by something else, but that's fine. We can still talk about Stefon Diggs, the Bills, and whatever other Buffalo nonsense we can dream up here in the next hour or so.
Buffalo Nonsense is a great name for a podcast, and if I didn't already have this one, I would absolutely steal that and make that
Yeah.
right now. But hey, you do what you can. So obviously we did not get a chance because of when that trade happened last week, the Stefon Diggs trade. We didn't get a chance to discuss this until now, essentially, because having that happen in the middle of not even at noon on a Wednesday before the draft, not my favorite time of day to do something like that. It's probably the most bizarre time for a trade like that to have happened, and I personally was not a fan of it. But you work with what you're given. But it's interesting. Yeah, no, we will get into all that. Before I get too off topic, before I get too off track, we of course have some things to take care of. And that includes some wonderful ad reads. And that includes an ad read from some of our favorite people over at the Cover One flagship show. And that's Greg and Aaron.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron for always doing that ad read the exact same way every single time. Consummate professionals as they are. Reedman Sums says, is there a way I could purchase the hat that Uber has? That's a great question. Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a free, ad read if you want.
Sure, yeah, go for it. I'm the one who usually does these. You get a chance to do this now.
The best Bills gear you can find and will find is on Twitter, 716 Transplant. Kate makes the best Bills gear. This hat is my favorite hat. I have multiple hoodies from her. I have some sweatpants. I have other hats from her. Follow her on Twitter, 716 Transplant. Her name's Kate, and she makes amazing Bills gear.
Sponsor the pod, Kate. We can wait on a sponsorship from her, but we already have one, of course, with Underdog Fantasy. Folks, we know that the season is not here yet, and we know that you are probably looking forward to the next season for many reasons, and one of those reasons should be because you get to play with Underdog Fantasy's fantasy sports. You can get all of the fun of having your own drafts, but without the waivers and layup decisions. Best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your own team and all the chances to win big, but with none of the week-to-week hassle. If you use the promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. It has been a long time since... Anytime we take a week off, I feel like I am just completely out of sync. Every other week that I do this, it is just automatic every time. And I feel like I am absolutely struggling just to get through this freaking intro right now. So, we're going to do something that should be easy to do, and that is talk about football, and more importantly, talk about this Stefon Diggs trade. So, I'll be honest, I was really surprised when this happened, especially given when it happened, and then I got just mad when I saw that they were giving the Texans a 5th and a 6th round pick and only getting a 2025 second round pick back. Not my cup of tea, I'll be honest. Not my favorite thing in the world. However, that being said, when you look at where the Bills were with Diggs, clearly this was, they felt like their best option was to just get rid of him because nothing else was working. And, whether or not that's the case, I have no idea. I'm not the one who's in the locker room. I think that those who are in the locker room certainly felt like there was one way out, and they certainly took that one way out. Now, the Bills somehow take on... I'm still not 100% sure how this whole salary cap breaks down. However, I'm sure if you wanted to, you can find Greg Thompson of the Greg Thompson Sports Show and the Cover One flagship show, who did his own video, I believe, yesterday, detailing where the Bills are at right now. With that, you have to be a OnePass subscriber to do that. So, if you want more incentive to be a OnePass subscriber, that's your reason. It's basically just Greg Thompson talking to you about accounting in NFL terms. All that to say, $31 million dead cap hit was what was expected to move on from Diggs. However, that all seems to come this year. I don't know what the deal is with the Texans now voiding Diggs's last 3 years of that extension. It's a whole thing. NFL salary stuff is complicated. So again, go watch that show if you want. It's worth watching, I'm sure. Now, I became more okay with this trade when you started to look at where a lot of other wide receiver trades have gone, right? Obviously, big name guys like Stefon Diggs 4 years ago got a first and some other picks. And the Bills happily gave that up because of what we saw from Stefon Diggs in these last 4 years. He was a wide receiver one. He helped Josh Allen step up to the next level in terms of quarterback play. He made great plays throughout the season, each season. He was that guy. He was that guy. But as time went on, as some frustrating playoff losses mounted up, clearly there was becoming a divide between Diggs and the Bills. And then when you look at where the other trades for wide receivers have gone, right? Look at Keenan Allen, right? Who's obviously older, but not significantly older, and is coming off of a career season. He went for a 4th round pick to the Bears. And he's also somebody that was on a 1-year deal at that point. Only has 1 year left on his contract. The Texans chose to make Diggs a 1-year deal, essentially. And you sort of see this pattern of okay, even players that are worth it, like a Keenan Allen or a Stefon Diggs, they just aren't getting huge deals in terms of what you're giving up in order to get these guys in a trade. So when you think about it that way, then it becomes a little bit more tolerable in that sense, in terms of what the Bills got back for him, at least for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, at first glance, right, seeing a 2nd round pick upset me. And then I found out that it was a 2nd round pick next year. And then I was more upset with the fact that I was upset with myself for only thinking it was a 2nd round pick. And then, much like you, I started to actually think about it a little bit and look at other trades and other, not just wide receivers as well, and realize it's not a bad return on, especially on a wide receiver that's 30 years old. And I will talk about it a little bit more, I'm sure, but I do wonder if there is some sort of letdown coming from Stefon Diggs. He's still a wide receiver one, still elite. I'm upset the Bills don't have him, but I do think there's some evidence that he might be turning the other direction. That being said, the L'Jarius Sneed trade, from what I remember, that's a 3rd round pick in 2025 for the Chiefs.
I believe so.
If we think about it that way, L'Jarius Sneed, prime of his career, an elite corner, only netted a 3rd round pick next year, and Stefon Diggs, the Bills get a 2nd round pick this year for, then it becomes a little bit more palatable where you're like, okay, the Bills actually did okay with this trade. The only major concern for Buffalo now is there's a massive void on the roster at this point without Stefon Diggs.
Well, and this is sort of what made the timing of the trade all the more interesting. Spin brings up a good point here. At least it wasn't a Minnesota 2nd round pick. Yeah, that is true. That is important because based on where the Texans are and where the Vikings are right now, the Vikings are probably picking earlier than the Texans are. So that is a good point. He also says, looks like he's breaking this whole thing down actually. Diggs' current salary cap take 2. Diggs' current salary cap hit this year went into the dead cap debt instead of his cap going back into the Bills' overall salary cap, and the remaining balance is around $3 million that made the debt square. If you all made sense out of that, good for you. I read it off, and I am certain that Spin is right. So we're gonna trust that. Let's see. It's tough. I mean, it is interesting to bring up the L'Jarius Sneed trade, though, because that is the type of play. Like, if you're going to talk about the importance of having a number 1 wide receiver, the other important part of that is having somebody that can cover number 1 wide receivers. Spin says, words are not my best strong suit. The words were not the problem. The NFL and their insane, ridiculous way of constructing a budget is the problem. I am certain that you are correct and worded it as best as you could, given what the NFL does to try and make a budget that works and everybody trying to work around it.
Just to razz Spin a little bit here, I love that message because it's strong suit, not strong sweet.
I was gonna let that go. But
it's all in good fun for Spin. It's all in good fun.
But again, going back to sort of the timing of this, right, this is now in a way sort of showing your hand in terms of what you're doing in this draft, which I feel like Brandon Beane, since he's been here, has done a good job of not doing. I think that, the only time where it seemed obvious what they really wanted to do was probably back in 2019, when it was clear they wanted to take an interior defensive lineman and would have preferred it to be Ed Oliver. And they weren't expecting Quinnen Williams to fall. They probably would have been okay taking Christian Wilkins at that spot, but they wanted Ed Oliver. That's who they wanted. We all have seen that clip after Detroit takes TJ Hawkinson at 8 of Brandon Beane just going, yes! And, same reaction, Brandon. I was 100% there with that. It's just interesting that he's setting himself up in such a way that I don't think they're locked into wide receiver in the first round necessarily, but certainly at some point in those first 2, at absolute worst, 3 picks, right? Like, you can't just, go through those first 3 rounds without a wide receiver if you're the Bills at this point. There's no way that can work. And there's tons of depth in this receiver class, and it's important to recognize that even if they don't take one in round 1, that there are other guys in rounds 2 and 3 that are worth taking. Even guys that fit that sort of X-receiver mold that they will need. But it's also going to be more of a projection and maybe not an immediate contributor than it would be if you're getting somebody earlier. Yeah, I don't know what your overall.
Yeah, so I don't think they're locked in round 1. I now expect them to take a wide receiver in round 1.
Yeah.
But like you, it's weird. Brandon Beane doesn't show his hand ever. And it's been like a notorious thing, even with NFL reporters. You know, they always talk about the Bills are always in on everyone. And part of being in on everyone is so that you're in on no one to everybody else, because they're not going to believe that you're in on that person. And it gives you a little bit of ability to kind of sneak up on somebody. In this draft, if Brandon Beane's targeting a wide receiver, which I expect him to do, he's not going to sneak up on that. People expect that now, unless that's his I'm playing chess while you're playing checkers game, where he's trying to get people to jump him at 28, and then he's going to get a talented non-wide receiver that falls to him, and then maybe he takes a wide receiver later. I don't know if I want to play that game, though, because if you miss out on a couple of the late first, early second round guys, and then we're talking about, you know, some later round guys, I don't want to bank on that being one of our top 3 wide receivers, and the Bills right now need a top 3 wide receiver. The one saving grace for me is if we go back to 2019, Josh Allen's second season, he had John Brown and Cole Beasley at the time. And Josh Allen was not Josh Allen then. He was not this version. He was a very different version of who he is as a player. And as much as people want to pretend like Stefon Diggs is the only reason because of that, that's not true. Stefon Diggs was a big part of it, but he wasn't the reason for it. I still think Josh can be elite despite not having Stefon Diggs. If you take John Brown and Cole Beasley, now you look at the Bills and we're saying Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir right now are your 2. I think John Brown and Cole Beasley are better than that, the current duo, depending on, who knows, maybe Khalil Shakir keeps improving and we're like, oh my God, dude, did we find a guy in that, 2022 NFL draft? Right. That being said, if you can then take those 2 guys, they're 2 solid building blocks, and add a high upside wide receiver in this draft, and then couple that with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox and James Cook, you can still have a very good, very, very good offense, and one where we might look at it and say, yeah, are we seeing a little drop-off from our wide receiver 1 per se, from Stefon Diggs to whoever else we're going to have? Sure, but Josh is able to do so much that he's getting more people involved. Maybe there is a sneaky benefit to this. I'm not saying I am happy about watching an offense without a player like Stefon Diggs, but there's a chance the Bills can make this work. And I still, at the end of the day, trust 17 to make this offense, hum and be a top 5 offense this coming season.
At the end of the day, Josh Allen is still Josh Allen, right? Mm-hmm. In the same way that Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes, even though you take away Tyreek Hill and basically any sort of capable receiver from that team, they found a way to win a Super Bowl in spite of all that. Go through some of these comments here. Peter Wilson says, trading up past maybe 20 or 22 would be really dumb to me. I want an alpha, but not at the expense of feeling 2 to 3 extra needs and depth concerns. We will get into some trade scenarios. Word comments. Okay. Diggs was due almost $28 million in salary. Cut him cost just over $31 million. 31 minus 28 equals $3 million. Okay. I think that makes sense. I'm gonna say that makes sense, and I'm gonna pretend that I can make sense of that. So, I had my neighbor do the math. There you go. Smart. That's what friends are for, right? Spin brings up another good point. Diggs just sped up Josh's development. I think that's a good.
I like that.
A good way of putting that. Because there was a clear path, right? Like going from year 1 to year 2. Year 2, Josh was clearly a step forward from. Like, clearly. And the fact that somebody like John Brown, who had been in the league for a while, had a career year with Josh Allen, what was important. And Cole Beasley also had a great year in that rookie year, or second year. But taking that next step required bringing in somebody like Stefon Diggs, who was not just going to be your X receiver, but going to be a dominant receiver week in and week out. So I think that it's it's tough, and like you said, it is tough to see someone like that go. I still have and will continue to have my Stefon Diggs jersey right there, because it's, probably the most fun I've had watching a Bills wide receiver since like Stevie Johnson. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
I'm not getting rid of that. Come on. Like, he had 4 great seasons, and that doesn't go away. Those memories don't go away. But I do understand why the Bills wanted to move on from him, because it's clear now that the division between him and the Bills was much more than what the Bills were letting on, which, for the record, is how good organizations should be run. I think people really started to realize how good of a manager and coach Mike Tomlin was when Antonio Brown became what we now know of as Antonio Brown. And we sort of saw, after he got traded, like, all the different things that happened. And it's sort of like, how was this team in playoff contention when all of this was going on around them? Like, and how did no one know outside of this building what was going on until Antonio Brown basically said, yeah, I'm not playing for you guys anymore. Like, deuces, see ya. Like, that's the sort of thing that we're talking about here. It's wide receivers are who they are, right? Like, there's that classic tweet of like how different position groups tweet. Like, quarterbacks are always like, oh, praise God, God is great. Running backs are like, I'm just all about that grind, baby. And wide receivers are like, the enemy speaks softly and carries a knife. And tight ends are always like, derp.
And or honestly, in case doot.
Each day that passes, the more that tweet becomes more accurate and true. It's just weird, man. Sespinar says it is always possible that it might be better for both Diggs and the Bills. And honestly, that's probably true, because if the Bills do get a wide receiver that they really like and they feel like will complement what Kincaid and Samuel and Shakir do, then you have him for 4 years at least on a rookie contract, which is way less than what Stefon Diggs is getting paid. And when you look at where the Texans and and more specifically where Diggs are, Diggs now being on a 1-year deal means that he could have a career year, and either he's getting the franchise tag or he's gonna be a free agent and get another big deal from some other team.
With Dallas.
Probably Dallas, right? Like come 2025, March, whenever, when the league year opens, Stefon Diggs is probably a Dallas Cowboy. We don't know who's going to be playing quarterback for them in 2025, True. But that's a discussion for another time. Yeah, it's tough. And I don't like having to answer the question of who is their future wide receiver going to be, but that's also why we're here. We're not here to shy away from the tough questions here. This is a no spin zone, even though we do love our lovely friend Spin here. The Juice Screw says, if they trade up, it will most likely be for BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr. If they stay at 28, it's Leggett. Xavier Leggett as a first round pick would be interesting. I like Xavier Leggett. I'd be happy with that pick in general. I kind of feel like that's somebody you can get in the second, right? Because there's a lot of questions with Xavier Leggett with his... he has an injury history, right? And a late breakout, is a little bit older. Like, those are the usual red flags that come with a wide receiver. Let me be clear. Those are the usual red flags that come with wide receivers that bust. But I like Xavier Leggett, and there are guys that have had those sort of concerns in the past, whether it's like a Cooper Kupp or somebody like that. Like, Puka Nacua is probably not the best example of that. He definitely had injury concerns. But there were other things with Puka that made him fall to the 5th round. But like, Puka was also somebody that you looked at and there was a lot of good stuff with him. You just sort of have to take a chance on that. I think with a similar thing with Xavier Leggett, where it's like there's a lot of good stuff that he brings to the table, and you kind of have to just take a bet on those sorts of traits, I think.
Yeah. My thing, and I've said it in previous shows, I want the Bills to go for the upside. Like, I want them to take the risk. If that means there's a higher chance that the receiver busts and he's really nothing at all, I'm fine with that. If the upside is a true wide receiver one that plays the X and can dominate, I don't want, a middling receiver, and I can't really think of one off the top of my head. I don't want somebody that I'm like, he's fine. He's okay. I want a guy that I'm like, this is a dude. And just circling back to Stefon Diggs, and this is going to come off as a little bit of cope. And I don't mean it to, because this entire, show and even on Twitter, I've been constant where it sucks that Stefon Diggs is not on this team, because Stefon Diggs is still a really, really good wide receiver. And when he is playing at his peak, he's still probably a top five wide receiver. The only thing is, in going back through this previous year, and it started for me in the Jaguars game, surprisingly, it seemed like that alpha ability was starting to wane a bit. And what I mean by that, if you go into that Jaguars game, there's a throw late or earlier in the fourth quarter. Bills are down 11-7 at that point in time, where Josh puts the ball up and gives Diggs a 50-50 shot at the ball. Diggs, it's up to you. You get the ball or they get the ball. Well, they got the ball. And then what I started looking at the rest of the season is, when those 50-50 balls went up, Stefon Diggs rarely came down with them. And my memory of Stefon Diggs was he always came down with them. You go to the Raiders game a couple years ago, I forgot who it was over, where he just mossed a dude. Yeah. That was the COVID year, I believe. And then you go to the playoffs. And this is where my biggest gripe with Stefon Diggs comes, is his biggest complaint, it seemed, coming into this season was that the Bills weren't doing enough to win, whether that be Josh Allen not doing enough, people weren't playing well enough, et cetera, et cetera. And then you go into that playoff game against the Chiefs, and Stefon Diggs is supposed to be him. He's supposed to be the dude. He's the wide receiver one. He's the guy that works harder than anybody else. He's the guy that's here to win, and that's all he wants is to win, win, win. Josh Allen throws a 70-yard bomb that's perfect. It's almost perfect. I mean, it is perfect. Hits Stefon Diggs in the hands and he drops it, and the Bills lose the game. I know Tyler Bass missed a field goal. If Stefon Diggs catches that ball, the Bills have a shot to win that game. And the upsetting thing to me about that is that ball was so – if that ball is completed, we're talking about that throw for the rest of Josh Allen's career. Yes. But we're not going to talk about it ever, because the guy that says he's the dude couldn't catch what should be an easy ball for a player of his ability. So all this is to say that as much as I'm upset he's not on the team, I do question if that alpha ability that he's had his entire career is starting to slightly wane. And if it is, look, Brandon Beane might have made the best choice here, where it's like, let's get out of it now this year, free up cap next year, and maybe we go get the dude that is the alpha currently in the NFL in this draft.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and this is the draft to make a move like this, right? Like, there are so many receivers in this class that I would be really totally on board with having. Steve Noble says, I just want to hear Leggett speak at press conferences. He and Ed Oliver together would be a must-watch. If you've never heard Xavier Leggett talk, that is a Southern boy. If a Southern boy has ever had a Southern boy, that is, man, just, whew, that it's worth listening to. Honestly, like, it's really great. WS says trade way up to get neighbors. Os Iman. Ooh boy, this is we're getting into the Hispanic and Latin crowd. So if I mispronounce this, I'm sorry. I had so many years of Spanish because I live in Florida, but I'm trying my best here. Os Irma, what's the tilde over the A? How is it even pronounced?
I don't know.
Sapekin. I'm not going to pretend this is a name.
I think you did a good job.
I'm sure it is a name. Oh, Brazil. This is why it doesn't make sense. It's Portuguese. I don't know any Portuguese. Yeah, so I have to go back to this. Give me A.D. Mitchell. He is the guy. And directly after that, Spin says, no to A.D. Mitchell. Too many red flags. Takes plays off. A.D. Mitchell does not seem like the Bills' type of wide receiver, right? And I've said enough about A.D. Mitchell here and online, but I'll say it again. Yeah, A.D. Mitchell's not my guy. not my type of guy. There's a lot of, like I just said, there's a lot of receivers in this class that I would be very happy with taking. A.D. Mitchell is not one of them at this point.
Let me ask you. Okay, pick 28. The Bills. You have two options, and you have to take one of them.
Sure.
Okay. A.D. Mitchell or Keon Coleman. At 28, you have to take one of them.
Yeah, I'd probably take Keon Coleman.
Okay. Interesting.
And I'm not like a huge Keon Coleman. I know we had a whole discussion about him after the combine. You know, Keon Coleman is definitely a one-trick pony at this point. But I also think that he has a lot of rawness to him that allows you some more moldability in terms of what he can become. I don't know if I see that with A.D. Mitchell. I think kind of what you see is what you get from A.D. Mitchell. And, I mean, yeah, there's plenty of discussion about the type of personality that he has. And I think especially since you just moved off of Stefon Diggs because his personality was too disagreeable for you to handle, bringing in A.D. Mitchell, that doesn't seem like the move. That doesn't make sense to me based on what we know. And maybe I'm just annoyed because A.D. Mitchell's has been mocked to the Bills so many times by people at this point that I'm just kind of like I don't know what to do with this. But what I do know is I'm not a fan of A.D. Mitchell. I'm not all that interested in A.D. Mitchell. Yeah, Bills are electric kind of said Mitchell is talented, but so is Marcel Darius. Marcel Darius also had some very good seasons with the Bills, and I don't want to erase that, but obviously there was a point where Marcel Darius just sort of said, yeah, I'm done doing what I want to do here. I need to head out. Yeah, it's tough. And I think now is probably a good time to get into some of the work that we did in the background here. And I don't know, so we're gonna start with a trade up scenario. We got a trade up scenario that we've put together, and I'm gonna bring it up right now on this screen in like 2 seconds, as long as my mouse can actually work. And there we go. So first of all, shout out to you, Uber, for putting this together, and also for putting together this whole Uber DV, which is Uber Draft Value, which is a new trade chart and value chart that you have put together to kind of continue to evolve the idea of what a trade chart should be. A lot of people still rely on that trade chart that Jimmy Johnson made back in the 90s, and at this point, kind of outdated. It's a nice baseline. Yep. At that point, it was important to have something like that, but it's 2024. It's current year now, right? Like, let's evolve what our discussions about this. So, here's the proposed trade. If you're talking about getting one of those top three guys, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, someone like that, whichever one of those three is available, assuming they make it to the Bears pick at number 9, and the Bears have been reported as a team that wants to trade out of that pick. They want to trade back. So, the Bills would get the 9th overall pick, which would be 700 DV, and a 2025 5th round pick, which is 9.17 DV, for a total of 799.17. The Bears would get pick 28, which would be obviously where the Bills are picking right now. They would get a 4th round pick, which is 128, and they would also get the compensatory pick, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So they would get both 4th round picks plus a 2025 1st round pick for a total of 793.45, which is a very ever so slight lean towards Buffalo getting an advantage here. Now, is that a lot to give up for a wide receiver? Yes. I'm sure there are some Bills fans that would be like, oh my gosh, I'm having Sammy Watkins flashbacks right now for something like this. But on the other hand, there aren't a lot of trades like this that happen, right? For a wide receiver in particular. And you're the one who's done the research here, so I'll let you kind of speak on that in particular.
Yeah, the only true example of that, where you're talking about somebody moving up from, past pick 15 into, say, the top 10 for a wide receiver. The only one that's happened in the past 20 years is the Julio Jones trade. Like, that's literally the only one. It's never happened outside of that. And even when you go back to Sammy Watkins, the Bills were inside the top 15 at the time, right, and then moved up to pick 4 to get Sammy Watkins. So it's slightly different. With wide receivers, I think the one thing is that we've all learned in wide receivers drafted first round, it's about 50-50 that they're going to work. If even that, maybe 40-60, where 40s if they work, 60 they don't. I mean, you can go back through all the drafts over the past few years, and you can see countless examples of busts inside the top 10. I mean, the first name that came to my mind, which this is kind of unfair because he was drafted for one reason and one reason only, but that's John Ross, right? He was drafted because of that 40-yard dash. He never was anything in the NFL. So to your point, is this a lot to trade up for a wide receiver? It's a massive amount to trade for a wide receiver, and it's not a sure thing. I think a lot of people think those 3 guys, right, Harrison, Odunze, and Neighbors, are sure things. I would put money on it that one of them doesn't work, because that's historically what's been proven. One will not work, at least one.
Yeah, exactly. I'm totally with you. I mean, you go back to that 2014 draft, Sammy Watkins, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., right? Those were sort of the 3 guys where it was like they were the consensus top 3 guys. And Mike Evans, who I think most people were kind of like, this is the biggest question mark of those 3, has been the most consistent of those 3, right? And Odell is probably the best overall receiver. Like, at his peak, Odell was better than everyone else in that class, but injuries totally derailed him. And with Sammy Watkins, like, everyone kind of viewed him as wide receiver 1 of that class, and he had some really good years to start off with, but off-field stuff, lack of focus, injuries just sort of killed any momentum that he may or may not have had. And, when we say, like, oh, well, the odds are low that all of these guys are going to work out, that's not necessarily to say that it's going to be their fault, necessarily, right? Like, we're not talking about all of these guys, sometimes you end up in a bad situation. Sometimes you get hit with injuries. Sometimes something just doesn't go your way. But you do, with the Bills, have a pretty good shot. Because you have Josh Allen. You have a pretty good group of trainers and athletic staff that have been invested in. You have a great weight room to work with. Like, you are giving yourself, essentially, a very good chance as a rookie to succeed with this team, particularly at wide receiver. Hang on one second, I got...
God bless.
That was awful. That was awful. Did not enjoy that. Never again. 0 out of 10. Speaking of some strong takes, Bills Are Electric says, I do not want to give up 4 picks for 1 wide receiver. That's fair. And that's fair. Now, to me, if you're trading up to 9... the most likely scenario is you're trading up for Rome Odunze. He seems to be, I don't want to say consensus wide receiver 3 because there's a lot of opinions about these 3 guys, but he seems to be consensus, like the 3rd guy that's going to be off the board in terms of wide receivers. When I watch Rome Odunze, and funnily enough, I was actually watching Rome Odunze when this Stefon Diggs trade happened, and not expecting that Stefon Diggs trade to happen, every time I watch him, I think he looks like Jamar Chase. And so let's frame it that way. Would you be willing to give up pick 28, 128, 133, and a first-round pick for Jamar Chase?
On a rookie
contract.
Yes.
Starting in 2024 with a 5th-year option.
Where do I sign? I sign it right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it goes back to that whole Family Guy meme of like, well, guys, I mean, Lois, the boat is a boat, but the box could be anything. It could even be a boat. And that's always the case with the draft. It is a mystery. It's a gamble. It's a bet. But if you feel confident in a guy, I mean, there are just some guys you just feel good about. And I understand we all get burned at some point or another by that feeling, but someone like Odunze, I mean, just watch this guy. I mean, he's just electric. Sorry, to use your name. Bills are electric, but he is electric. He is just absolutely fantastic. I love what he's smooth. He's consistent. He can win in all different ways. I'm a big fan of Rome Odunze. If they made this trade, it would be a difficult pill to swallow in one sense, but also knowing that I get Rome Odunze, it would be pretty fun. Spin says, I will take that deal every day, twice on Sunday. Tristan Parsons says, I'm team trade down all day instead of any sort of trade up. We will get to a trade down scenario in just a little bit. We have this is from Spin, we have a minimum second will act as our first next season, and who cares about a couple 4th round picks for Odunze or one of the top 3 wide receivers? I think that's fair. Our friend from Brazil says, I think moving up to Denver's position is more realistic. This is interesting, but who are you moving up to number 12 in order to get? Are you getting Brian Thomas Jr. there? I don't know if I'd trade all the way up like 16 spots to get Brian Thomas Jr. unless one of these guys just falls to that spot, which is certainly possible. That would be a fun scenario. Roy Collins says, I just can't see Bean doing something like that. I disagree with that. I understand what you're saying. I kind of get that, but I think that I could see Brandon Bean pulling off a move like this for somebody that he likes, right? And that's always the thing with Brandon Bean, is that at a certain point, and he's said this, he's on record for saying this, he just gets antsy. He gets antsy.
Yeah.
And he'll trade up a couple spots to get someone, whether that's Kyer Elam or Dalton Kincaid. And there's reasons for that. It's not just because he's antsy. It's because he believes that there are other teams that might take him, or another team that might trade up in front of them, or they're just running out of depth at that position, and they know that that's a position they need, that they need like a high blue chip value type of player there. So I understand the thought process and the feeling of that, but I think at the end of the day, Brandon Bean gets the players that he wants to get more often than not. And if one of these wide receivers that are probably going to get selected in the top 10 are one of those guys that he wants, he's going to try everything he can to go get that guy. So it's interesting. Spin also says, can just trade back in the second to recoup some of the picks if you want more picks. And that's true. That's a good thought to have. Then Roma Dunze goes drag racing and poof, you lost those 4 picks. Listen, you can say that about Josh Allen, all right? Like, I don't know. Maybe part of the reason why I love Roma Dunze is because of the answer he had to a question at the Combine. Somebody asked him, if you were the pilot of a crashing plane, do you think you'd be able to land that plane? And he just straight up said, nope, not happening. The plane is going down and all souls have perished. He literally said all souls have perished, which is just so funny to say. And not only just in that context, but just like off the cuff when you get asked a question like that. Yeah, it's just really funny that that's part of that. Let's see, what else do we have here? If they work, it's 100% on the quarterback and the OC. It's part of the equation. I wouldn't say it's 100% of the equation. Mike Malley Guitar says, I don't like Odunze as much as I do MHJ or Neighbors. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is like a good step above Neighbors and Odunze, but I think Odunze is on the same level as Neighbors. Odunze is probably more like capable of winning in different ways than Neighbors is. It's just that Neighbors' way of winning is so hard to beat and so explosive and so dangerous and unique that it's hard to pass up on somebody like that. Jordan Poyer's former driver, does Diggs fly or flop in Texas? He will fly all the way to Dallas after 2024. And I think that feels pretty good. Wow, a lot of chatting in the chat. Thank you all for joining and participating in all this. Dan Lipke says, Odunze is not even close to Jamar Chase. If you're gonna do that, it might as well be to get Neighbors. Sweet spot will be going a bit for BTK. I'm gonna assume that's BTJ, or staying put for AD Mitchell, or going back for Leggett. That's a lot of there's a lot going on there. I agree with some of it, and I disagree with some of the other parts of it. I know I'm so detailed in my analysis here. Just the tip of canoe. One thing I'm confident in: we aren't trading up in round 1 for a running back. That is true. Especially not in this class. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this particular trade.
Yeah. Just spin actually makes the main. So to be transparent, prior to the Stefon Diggs trade, anytime I saw any reference to the Bills trading up in the first round for a wide receiver, I scoffed at it. I was like, that's just silly. There's no way they would do that. It doesn't make any sense. And much of my argument relied on the fact that you don't make a massive trade up in the first round unless it's for a quarterback, which the Bills do not need. Like, historically, these trades that are this far in distance are for quarterbacks, therefore nothing else. Like, the other things, like I said, Julio Jones, the only example of a wide receiver with this big of a trade. But that trade for Stefon Diggs obviously changed my opinion on this for many reasons. One of them being the future second-round pick. After thinking on it, much like Spin said, the future second-round pick essentially acts as the Bills' first-round pick next year. You assume Minnesota isn't going to be very good this year, so it's going to be an early second. It makes it easier to move on from your first, and you still have, your first 3 picks are in the first 2 days, and you have a pseudo first-round pick in that Minnesota one early in the second round. In fact, you could use those 2 second-round picks to jump up and go back to the first next year. So it lets you trade that first-round pick. The Bears need picks too. They only have 4 picks this draft. Like, that's probably why it's being rumored that they're willing to trade out of pick 9, because they need more draft picks. They need more bodies, young players that they can fit on that roster. Do I see this happening? I think it's possible. I don't think that this is outside the realm of possibility for Brandon Beane. He needs to love the guy that's there. It can't just be like, he could work out. It has to be someone that Brandon Beane is nearly sure of is going to work in Buffalo. And they have to fall to 9. It's going to be so hard for the Bills to move up further than this. And the other benefit to this, the last part of this, if the Bills believe Rome Odunze is the dude, let's say he falls to 9, the Jets are at 10, who very well could take him. And if Brandon Beane truly loves him, there's no way he's going to want him to go in division. You hop the Jets, you take him. The Jets end up taking Brock Bowers, so they still do pretty damn well. But you get Rome Odunze, and maybe he's the wide receiver 1. And maybe, in a perfect world as a Bills fan, he's better than Stefon Diggs was last year. Not saying that's going to be the case, but if that happens, then suddenly your offense is better than it was. And sure, you lost 2 fourth-round picks, but what's it matter if you got your guy there, pick number 9?
It will also be deeply ironic, and I'm just realizing this now, if the Bills trade the compensatory pick that they got for letting Tremaine Edmonds walk to the Bears in order to get Rome Odunze. Yeah.
Dude, if they had gotten a third, oh my God. This all would have been so much easier if they had just gotten a third instead of a fourth, which they should have gotten a third, but...
And hearing Brandon Beane talk about that at the owners' meetings of just like, yeah, it was like that close. And that was it. Just like, God, that makes me even more irritated at that whole stupid process. So, there are some of you who are not fans of trading that far up. And for you, we have a different scenario in place. And that is a trade back scenario. And I will bring that up on screen now, as soon as I figure out how a computer works. There we go.
Not as sexy.
Not as fun. There we go. So, here we go. The Bills would move back from 28 to 36, where the Washington Commanders pick. They would pick up pick number 78, and the Commanders would also receive a 4th-round pick. This is ultimately evens out more or less a slight lean towards the Bills in terms of draft advantage value. However, you trade back and you get a 2nd and a 3rd, which for a team that does not have a 3rd-round pick is pretty valuable. Having 2 2nd-round picks, a high 2nd-round pick, right, which is important here, plus another pick later in that round, plus a third. That is also pretty enticing, right? If you're not going to be able to get one of those guys that you want, either in a trade to the top 10 to get Neighbors or Odunze or one of those guys, and somebody at 28 isn't really catching your eye, it's worth looking at the trade back scenario, especially if this scenario is something like this, because this is pretty enticing to me, honestly.
Yeah, it's all dependent on if the guy's not there, right? Why would Brandon Beane stretch to pick a guy that he doesn't necessarily have a grade of the 28th pick overall on him? Sometimes you have to do that. You have no choice because trades take two people or two teams to execute. But in a world where the Commanders, who actually do have a decent amount of picks, if they want to jump up and get a second first round pick, maybe they're trying to pair, I don't know, maybe there's a Jackson Powers Johnson falls to 28, and maybe the Bills don't want him. I would want the Bills to take him, but that's a whole different thing. Maybe the Commanders jump up to get him. The Bills can still stay within range to pick a couple guys that'll probably be there at 36, and you get an early third round pick. So you get 3 day 2 picks. You can fill in a couple different holes there, and maybe you even double dip. Maybe you use those 2 third-round picks both on wide receivers. Maybe you use a second-round pick on a wide receiver. You get a safety. You get a defensive lineman. There's a lot of things that can happen here. Obviously not as sexy, again, as the trade-up. The trade-up's always exciting. But trading back for the Bills this year, my only concern with them doing it multiple times, they have so many draft picks right now. They don't need more. And usually when you trade back, you're gaining more picks. The Bills legitimately do not need to gain more picks. They won't be able to draft enough people to fit on the roster. So unless they're using some of those additional picks they get to trade up multiple times later in the draft, it doesn't really make sense for them to stockpile picks. But yeah, this trade, if they did it, it's got to be because their guy's not there at 28, and they're comfortable with a couple guys falling to them at 36.
Right, and this is the other part of it. Like you said, the Bills don't need more picks in terms of like numbers, right? Like even getting rid of a 5th and a 6th in the Stefon Diggs trade, they still have plenty of picks to work with. So even if you make this trade, this hypothetical trade where you're at 36, if there's somebody you like at that comes on the board after you've already picked at 36 and you're waiting at where's their own second round pick at?
60, I'm getting it 60.
60. If there's somebody in between 36 and 60 that you still want, guess what? You can make a move. You can make a move from 60 up to some other place to get somebody else that you like there. Because now you have the ammunition to work with without completely handicapping yourself either. So, even though I would love someone like a Rome Odunze on this team, and I'm willing to swallow that kind of compensation in order to get somebody like that, this sort of trade also makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, and also is very enticing, just sort of thinking about the sort of players you can get in the second round, at wide receiver in particular, because that's the main thing that we're talking about. You know, I think that somebody like Ladd McConkey would probably still be available. Xavier Leet probably would still be available. Keon Coleman would even be available. Like, there are guys that would be available at this spot at 36 that are worth taking. And it would not be the same as having somebody like Malik Neighbors or a Rome Odunze, but it's certainly cheaper and in both salary and overall compensation. And that matters as well, especially for a team that's kind of going to be against the cap for a while, right?
Yep.
Like, you're in a tough spot, but there is a way where you can work around that and make things work for you. And this is one of those ways. If I'm at a point now, and maybe this is my turn to cope, where if the Bills make a move up into the top 10 to get one of those top 3 wide receivers, I am all for that. I would be very, very happy with that. If the Bills move back to some sort of scenario like this, where they pick up a 3rd rounder and give up a 4th rounder in order to get it, I'm also totally okay with that too. In fact, I'd be pretty happy about that. Because I feel confident in who they can get at all of those spots. If they stay at 28, I'm okay with that because I think that there are still guys that can potentially end up at that spot that they would like. And some of those guys may not be wide receivers. And that needs to be something that has to be talked about because there's a good chance where they just say, hey, there's somebody we really like at 28, but it's not a wide receiver. And if that's the case, it's a lot of Bills fans that I feel like are going to be very upset at that. But wide receiver is not the only position on this roster. And if you bring in a player that can contribute to your team in the first couple of years, whether that's a safety, whether that's a defensive lineman, like, take one of those guys too. Like, if a Cooper DeJean is available and none of the other receivers that you like are there, if none of the other defensive linemen are available, yeah, I'll take Cooper DeJean. I don't think Cooper DeJean is going to be available, especially after all of the testing that he did today, a couple of months removed from his broken leg. This is somebody that could play corner, safety, returner. Like, this is a multi-talented guy who ran like a 4.4 something. And had a great explosive drills as well. So that's somebody I'd be okay with. Yeah, somebody like Jerjon Newton, if somebody like that is available at 28, I'm totally on board with that. If somebody like a Leatu Latu is available at 28, Jared Verse, I'm on board with that too. Like, there are other players that aren't wide receiver that I would be okay with taking. You brought up Jackson Powers Johnson earlier. I'd be okay with that because of what Jackson Powers Johnson can bring to this team in the future and even right now. Right? Like, I feel like so. And I've said enough. Let's get into some of these comments. Let's hear from the people. Roy Collins says, how upset will Bills fans be if they're sitting around for 3 hours waiting for the pick and then Goodell announces the Bills have traded their first round pick? Yeah, sometimes that's how it goes. Patriots fans have been well-versed with that, with Belichick.
Yeah.
Waiting hours and hours for him to just trade out of the first round. Let's see, Andy Swift says, yes, a young Diggs that we don't have to pay big bucks to for 4 years. That's a major part of this. It's a big part of this. Let's see. Regarding the actual trade that's on the screen right now, this looks better, says Adam Luloff. Andy Swift also says this works, and you still may be able to get McConkey at 36. Again, listen, we're both McConkey fans. Am I right in saying that? Yeah,
yep,
we're both
correct.
McConkey fans. I would say many people at Cover One are McConkey fans. Let's see. Our friend from Brazil, not a safety, please. Listen, it might happen, and you may need to prepare yourself for that possibility, for that particular timeline to happen. Adam Luloff also says they are taking a defensive tackle in the first 2 rounds, almost guaranteed. See, now that's interesting. I think it's possible. I don't know if it's like guaranteed that they take a defensive tackle in the first 2 rounds. Obviously, they're thin at defensive tackle. They have Austin Johnson. They have Daquan Jones. They have Ed Oliver. And then it's some other people, right? Like Ilianku, right, is on this roster right now, and he was DT4. I don't love that. Deshaun
Williams, too.
Oh, that's right. They did sign Deshaun Williams. And that is an interesting guy to have as DT4. Yeah. But I also don't love that either.
Yeah, not great.
Certainly, and again, Daquan Jones and Austin Johnson are great for 2024, but Daquan Jones is going to be 33. Austin Johnson is already 30. Neither of these guys are necessarily the future of the defensive line, and so you need to really think about who that future is going to be. And it's harder to find good, talented defensive linemen that you can coach up later in the draft. And our friend from Brazil brings up a good point that we have brought up on this podcast a lot. If there's a quality in our coaching staff, it's developing good defensive backs in late picks. I don't think it's worth a high pick in this situation, not anymore. And that's a fair point to bring up. That's totally a fair thing to say, because we've seen this team succeed with late round defensive backs a lot. We've seen that throughout McDermott's whole career as a defensive coordinator in both Philadelphia and in Carolina. Like, this is something that he's known to do. But there's also something to be said about taking a guy because he's just that special and that unique. And whether or not the Bills feel that exact same way, who knows? But that's just sort of my own personal thought process on that. McConkey, this is spin. McConkey moved up on my list now that Diggs is gone. Again, I could say it 1,000 times, and I probably will say it 1,000 times until the draft starts in a couple weeks. I love Lad McConkey, and I would love to see him in a Bills uniform. We will see what happens, though. Any other thoughts that you have with this trade, with wide receiver, with other picks that might happen at this point?
Yeah, I like what you said earlier. You mentioned the cap kind of hell the Bills are in, and I think there's a little bit of you're completely right, and I think there's a little bit of a misconception with the Diggs trade where people are like, we have so much cap space next year. Look at all the fun we can do. Imagine the Step Brothers, all the activity we can do in this room now that we have all this space. I think that's a little bit of fool's gold, to be honest, and there's a couple of reasons for that. There's a couple players on the Bills roster that are going to need to get paid at some point in time. Spencer Brown being one of them. I don't know if the Bills will pay him, but he is on the final year of his contract. Terrell Bernard has 2 years left, so next year would be the last year on his contract. He probably needs an extension if the Bills want to keep him, especially with Matt Milano starting to get up there in age. Maybe they want to stick with Terrell Bernard as Milano ages out. Then you look at Rasul Douglas, maybe you're basically your CB1. Last year of his deal, he might be out. The Bills are going to be without a safety next year because Mike Edwards is going to be gone. And then Christian Benford enters the final year of his deal next year as well. So you have all these players that are integral parts of the defense that some of them are going to need to get paid. And while you can kind of push that off again into 2026, I think some of the cap next year has to be used on it. Like, I'm not expecting the Bills to go into next offseason and be like, we're going to go sign someone like T. Higgins or something like that. I don't think that's the case. So when you look at these draft picks, the Bills need to find players that not only can impact their season this year, but are rosterable. Like, that's going to be important on the later round picks. What guys can they take in the 5th, 6th, maybe even the 7th round that can actually make the Bills roster? Not make the practice squad, legitimately make the 53, because if there's one thing we've learned the past few years, the Bills will get poached. There will be players that get poached when the Bills try to put them on the practice squad, just because when you're talented like the Bills are, when you're talented like the Chiefs are, when you're a talented organization, teams look at your organization and say, that player can't make their team because their team's really damn good, but that player can make our team. So I think that's one strategy that maybe gets overlooked from time to time, is finding these young, talented players that you have cap control under. And that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for the Bills to do this draft. Whether or not they trade up to the top 10 to go get one of those top 3 guys, or whether they sit there and wait, I think Bills fans will panic if they don't get a wide receiver in round 1. But I do think the Bills have earned a little bit of ability for some trust, especially going into last year where, we were all like, who the hell's going to play linebacker? Like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being one of the most hated draft picks over the past few years, ends up being a star in his second season in the NFL.
And I mean, you can even say that about right tackle, right? Where it was like,
correct.
Their plan can't really be to have Spencer Brown be their starting right tackle with no other option. And then they were like, no, like, we'll bring in who was the guy that was here for like a week and then he retired? I can't even remember his name.
The linebacker was Christian Kirksey.
Right. There was
who was the tackle? I mean, Jermaine Ifedi was believed to be one of the backup plans. He never did.
Jermaine Ifedi.
Yeah. I can't remember who the other guy was.
Yeah, it's the some Dolphins guy that I can't remember what his name was. Anyway, wasn't here, right? And he was here, and then he decided, no, not anymore. I'm out. I'm not playing this game anymore. And then it ended up working out, right? Like, it all ended up working out because Spencer Brown took an actual step forward as a player. And, you bring up Spencer Brown, Roy Collins also writes, Groot will most likely be on his 5th-year option as well, which is another important thing to think about. What are you paying Greg Rousseau if he's going to be somebody that you want to keep around? Like, it's tough. This is the tough part of managing a roster. This is the tough part of having a salary cap. It's going to be tricky. I'll take this off the screen. Actually, no, I won't, because I'll take the trade off the screen, because something else I'm going to bring up real quick as soon as I get this in position. There we go. Okay, so over the cap, we're looking at, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty here, right? Like, these are the current wide receivers that are available right now. You probably can't read it because this is super small print, and I did not think about that before I shared the screen, but I'm going to commit to this anyway. You have guys like Hunter Renfrow, Odell Beckham, Tyler Boyd, MVS, Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, Russell Gage, DJ Chark, Jamal Agnew. Like, if worse comes to worse, these are the sorts of guys who are available. And that would make me deeply uncomfortable. Like, if the Bills signed like DJ Chark or Michael Thomas, I can't imagine they would sign Michael Thomas, right? That would be insane.
No way.
That would be a crazy thing to do. Or Odell. Like, so you're talking about like a Tyler Boyd who's been a slot receiver basically his entire career. They don't need another slot receiver to take. Like, the one thing that they shouldn't do is look for a guy to take away snaps from Khalil Shakir, who they should feel very good about right now. Like, and DJ Chark, I mean, my gosh, there was a point where DJ Chark was a good player. That 2024 is not that point in time anymore.
Yes.
We have moved past that point. So, all of that to say is that while there are technically options available in free agency, if worse comes to worse and they don't find a guy, it's not something I'd like to entertain. It's not something that I want to do. It's just, everything about that makes me feel like they are taking at least one, if not multiple, wide receivers in this class. And, really, honestly, if worse comes to worse, they have future All-Pro Justin Shorter on the roster. So
I was just about to jokingly say something like that. Hey, who knows? I never know with this Bills team. I mean, we thought Spencer Brown was kind of a rough go of things. We didn't know where Terrell Bernard fit. Maybe Justin Shorter comes out next year and we're like, oh my God, we have DK Metcalf on our team. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But the crazier things have happened, I think.
Crazier things have happened. The likelihood of that happening seems very, very low.
Yes.
I don't know if I see that happening. All right. I know that this is shorter than most of our other shows, but there is something to be said about brevity. So I don't know if you have anything else to say.
No, I'm excited. As much as I don't watch college football or love college football or even like college football, I like the draft. I think the draft's really cool because it's a time where you can bring in a player that you can get excited about before they even step on the field. I'm very interested with what the Bills are going to do because of what we said earlier, where Brandon Beane never shows his hand ever, and it really seems like he's showing his hand right now. Does he completely mess with every fan out there, or does he do the thing and he goes up and gets a dude? He has a plan. He legitimately, you do not trade Stefon Diggs if you do not have a plan. The Bills have a plan. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it'll work, but it'll be damn fun to watch it happen, I guess.
You say it's fun now. When you
It could be nothing.
It's not going to be so fun. Oh, Spin. Oh, you had me. He's reading my mind here. All right, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Folks, it is time for
the truth or rubbish. Let's go.
Let's go. I was going to make it a surprise, and Spin just absolutely, completely killed me. He knew what I was.
Spin's been destroying this show all day. My God. Can't spell. Not good with words.
He's a
ruining
disruptor.
Surprise. Yeah.
He's a disruptor, is what he is. Folks, if you have never watched or a show in which we do true or rubbish, first of all, consider subscribing to the show, because then you'll get to see it more often. You can hit subscribe to Cover One down below. You can hit subscribe to your podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. You can even leave a review if you want 5 stars or 1 star if you're being honest. But this, it's a great way to support us. Hit the like button on your way out, all that fun stuff. But true or rubbish, the way it works, I give Uber a statement. He tells me if it is true or rubbish. You are all encouraged, not demanded to, but greatly encouraged to play along in the chat as well. All right, I'm sorry. So,
Walter yeah.
says this is all a smokescreen. There's a punter Bean really likes and he wants as much attention for wide receiver as possible. Brandon Bean is going full out Davis in his final years.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. True or rubbish? The Bills will make a trade into the top 10 in this draft.
I'm saying true.
This was true. All after all. Can't believe it. It was true.
Ooh. And okay, so you think it'll be something akin to the trade that you've proposed?
Yeah. And I don't think it because I proposed that trade. I think it because I think Bean and McDermott and Josh Allen are at a point where they want, like, the clock's ticking. I don't think the window's even remotely close to getting closed because Josh Allen still exists. And if he exists, I'm perfectly content with the Bills. And I believe that they will at some point win a Super Bowl. I think that they're going to start swinging for home runs. So they're not going to swing for singles or doubles or triples anymore. It's go for the home run. And if you strike out, you strike out. But at least you took a shot at it. And as much as it's giving up a lot to go get a position that doesn't necessarily work all the time, there's a very blatant hole on the Bills roster right now. And I can't fathom Brandon Bean just being like, yeah, we'll take a guy in the second round. Maybe he'll work out. I think he goes up and tries to get one of those 3, assuming one of those 3 falls a little bit. If those 3 get taken in the first 6 picks, I don't think he can get up there.
I think that's fair. I'm gonna hesitate on calling this true. I will call this rubbish. But I think that, again, like I said, if they do make this trade, I'm all for it because I love all 3 of these top 3 wide receivers. I'm totally into that idea. But like you said, there's a possibility where just none of them are available, and I don't think you're trading past where the Bears are at 9, right? Like I don't think you're getting up to 7 with the Titans. Yeah. You're not getting up to 5 or 6 or whatever. Like you're getting one of these guys at 9 if you're going to make that type of move, and maybe one of those guys just isn't available, and that's gonna be tough. All right, true or rubbish? The Bills will double dip at wide receiver in this draft class.
Oh boy. Like if they take a 7th round pick, use a 7th rounder for a wide receiver, are you counting that as a double if they take one in the first? All right, then they're double dipping.
This was true. All after all. Can't believe it. It was true.
Yeah, I think I would generally agree with that. I think that at some point they'll find another receiver that they like. They'll take one at the top that they feel very confident in, whoever that might be. And then later in the draft, just like, hey, let's just take another guy. What's another guy to have and compete on here with, like, Andy Isabella and Justin Shorter? I think that you kind of need to have as many bodies in that room as possible to just not only increase your odds of finding a guy, but also just fill out the roster and fill out the special teams. And that sort of thing is important to this team, obviously.
Yeah, and I think the way the roster you got Matt Collins, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. I'm pretty sure they're all going to make the roster. Justin Shorter, just because he's under rookie control and he can play special teams, pretty sure he's going to make the roster. So there's 4. You get an early one, there's 5, and then let's say a late one, there's 6. And I don't think the Bills are carrying 7 wide receivers, but 6 they could carry 5 too because they're so tight end dependent with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. But yeah, double dip isn't out of the realm of possibility. I just don't think it'll be like, oh, we're going to take one in the second round, and then we're going to trade up into the third round and take another one. I don't think that's happening.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. All right, last statement. True or rubbish? Stefon Diggs is one and done with the Texans and will be a Dallas Cowboy in the year 2025.
100% true.
This was
Yes.
true. All after all. Can believe it. It was true.
It almost feels too obvious, right? It just sort of feels like, what are we doing here? Can we just can we sim season so we can just get that result, right? Like, it feels so obvious at this point.
The only thing I'm checking, one sec. Oh yeah, no, Trevon Diggs will still be a Dallas Cowboy by that point. Yes, 100% 2025 Stefon Diggs will be on the Cowboys, which he'll be 31, 32 at that point in time. Like, fine, I guess. And who will be throwing the ball? Maybe Zach Wilson's their quarterback by that point. So go enjoy yourself, Stefon Diggs. You couldn't make it work with Kirk Cousins. You couldn't make it work with Josh Allen. You didn't want to make it work with C.J. Stroud. Enjoy Zach Wilson on the Cowboys in 2025. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Hey, listen.
I'm not salty.
Jerry Jones is making moves as an Arkansas booster to get John Calipari there as the basketball coach. So, Jerry Jones can make mountains move when he wants to. Everyone seems to believe that this is going to happen, except for Mike Malley guitar, and Jordan Poyer's former driver is hedging by saying Trubisky. Fair enough, I suppose. All right, that is. I think that's going to be it for us. Folks. Thank you very much for joining us on this show. We know that you've probably heard a billion different Stefon Diggs takes at this point, but we're glad that you came out and joined this show. On your way out, hit the like button, subscribe to Cover One. Go check out the other shows that are happening this week. Check out Air Raid Hours show from last night. Go check out Under Review and Sky's coverage tomorrow night with Joe DeRosa and Anthony Prohaska, respectively. You've got the Film Room on Wednesday with Eric and Anthony. You've got the Flagship Show with Greg and Aaron. You've got Thomas with Buffalo Late Night on Thursdays. You've got the Cover One College Football channel, which is a separate channel. Go and subscribe to that. That's got Marlon. You've got John and Daniel doing the draft show. I mean, those two guys are putting in a ton of work. They are worth listening to every week. Go subscribe to their channel. They are doing great stuff. You've also got Cover One Fantasy with Chris Shoes, who just churns out that content every day. Man. I do not know how he does that. It's kind of crazy, but he is we collectively on this podcast do not generally respect fantasy football analysts. However, Chris Shoes is not one of those guys. He puts in so much work. It's
infinite respect for him. Infinite
respect for Chris Shoes. Whether he stays with Cover One or not, infinite respect for Chris Shoes. He's great. Tons of shows. Go subscribe and consider, if you enjoy this sort of content, if you enjoy what we do here at Cover One, become a One Pass subscriber. It is the most direct way of supporting us here at Cover One. $60 a year, free swag of t-shirt, decal. You get access to exclusive content. You get access to the Slack channel where you get to talk to all these different people that are also Bills fans. On game day, that chat is popping with people and takes. And it's probably better than your Twitter/X feed. Speaking of which, Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter. I haven't been tweeting much nonsense lately, so it seems time for some nonsense. I might dive into that later this week. And then depending on how much nonsense I do, maybe we have to do an episode of Buffalo Nonsense at some point in time. But yeah, UberHansen on Twitter.
You all can find me at DFAUXY on Twitter. We will be back next week. We will see what that all brings.
Who knows?
Who knows? We don't plan that far ahead for these sorts of shows. There's so many things that happen in between. If we had planned a show last Monday, it wouldn't have included Stefon Diggs getting traded. So you never know what's going to happen in the NFL. But that is why we love and hate this sport so much. Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.